What's up, guys? It's Addy here, back with another video, and again, I'm talking about the free agency and everything that's going on. And there's a lot to talk about, a lot of new stuff. Um, some news on Al Horford, Jimmy Butler, and things like that. So let's get right into it. First off, Mike Conley has been traded to the Utah Jazz. That trade. Um, Not too much to talk about. I think it was pretty good for both sides. I personally think Memphis won that trade, which I always think of as a plus. I think if one team is getting a good player, the other team should get enough combined that it's worth more or equal to what that is. So I think it was pretty fair, but Memphis, I think overall the pieces together. They ended up helping them a little more. Hopefully, Mike Conley can be an important piece to the Utah Jazz. I know Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, they have a good 1-2 punch there. So adding in another guy like him can be very crucial and helpful. To the team. So definitely a plus for both sides. But moving on from that, some unfortunate news for the Celtics. Um, Al Horford has declined his player option. And he's going into the free agency, which was expected by everyone. But what wasn't expected is that there is talks of him ready to leave the Celtics, which is unfortunate. And the Celtics have not had a good start to this free agency anyway, even though it hasn't begun. But all with everything going down with Kyrie, and then more coming from Al Horford now. It's important to kind of see where this team is going to go, and probably towards a more Jason Tatum-led squad. So this helps a lot of other teams. Al Horford is a fantastic player. He's not at that prime level of a tier one free agent maybe, but a definite tier two. He does a lot for the Celtics. Watching the Celtics every season since he's come in, you can see I've definitely noticed that he really picks up the slack on a lot of things, and he's a very consistent and just a great player to have on your team. He's an all-around one of the better shooting big men, but he can do it in the post, not terrible at getting boards, a good defender, especially against guys like Joel Embiid, Giannis. He's shown that time and time again in the playoffs. He's very experienced, so he comes with a lot of pluses that a lot of teams could use. So I think he's going to be a very important guy to watch in this free agency. And if the Celtics do lose out on him, there's a lot of teams that have already shown interest. And to me, a lot of teams make sense. The Rockets, Clippers, Mavericks. But I think the Lakers might be a very valuable place for him to go. Unfortunately, it has to be the Lakers. But, if you see him going to one place, it makes sense that it would be the Lakers because, he's talked about how Boston might not have a future in winning. And, you can kind of see that being affected by the fact that Kyrie's not coming back. And so, based on that, seeing where the Lakers have progressed, both sides could really use the benefits of him signing there. Al Horford would get a team that's again in the competition, and the Lakers are already front runners in terms of the odds of winning. So he would get that perfect situation where he can use his talents to contend for a title, even though I still think the Celtics are title contenders, maybe not as high as the Lakers anymore, but that's really good for him because he could get a 4-year deal out of it, and I don't really think he's expecting too much out of the money, so I don't think he needs like a max $30 million contract. I think he'll be fine with like $20 million. And the Lakers, they benefit because right now their team alone, if the Warriors come back fully healthy the way they are, it's still going to be hard to beat the Warriors. So you need some more supporting cast, and they lost good role players like Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball and Josh Hart. They lost a lot of their bench and a lot of their starters that really helped them last season and had a bright future. So they definitely need at least another type of star player. And Al Horford's been an all-star. He's very experienced, so they can use that to their advantage. And they don't have the money for a max contract anymore because they pulled the trigger on the deal too early, and that's why they lost out on $8 million. So they had 32 million open, but now they only have 24 million, which is not enough for a max contract or anybody that is a big player, such as Kawhi Leonard. Talks of Jimmy Butler, anybody that they were really considering. They don't have the chance to get them anymore. So that's something to think about, and they're definitely gonna have to go a different route of who they're gonna pursue. So Al Horford might not be a bad option. That way they don't lose out on everybody on the free agency, because not a lot of guys are gonna want to take a pay cut and earn anything less than 30 million. Definitely guys like Kawhi Leonard and Kevin Durant, they're not going to earn less than 30 million. So they can't get a max contract like that, but they could get a guy like Al Horford that can really help them. And he would definitely be like, he's the type of guy that's on a championship contending team. He does a little bit of everything, and he's a good scorer, offensive, defensive, everything. Everything's a plus for him, and he knows his role and he fits right in. And he's not the type of guy that demands for the ball, or he's got a good attitude too. He's a good leader and a mentor, so they can use that when it comes to Kuzma and those growing guys. He can be really helpful for that too. So that's something to think about for the Lakers. And unfortunately, as a Celtics fan, it kind of blows that even Horford is going to leave. But he has a lot of options to consider, and it makes sense why he would want to, because he's just trying to get a little more money in the extra year of a deal, because the Celtics can only give him a 3-year contract. Whereas he can get like 4 out of the Lakers, or any teams that's on his list, the Clippers or whatever. But moving on, Chris Paul and James Harden have now come out to have problems, which is interesting because I always thought those two are a pretty tight dynamic duo, but I guess not. So this has been interesting as well. As soon as the offseason began, this news kind of popped up, and it's been growing ever since. But so probably, and Chris Paul demanded a trade and all that happening. So he's definitely probably going to be out of there by the end of this offseason. So there's been talks of the Celtics being interested, the Knicks, and the Timberwolves. A lot of people that are interested in Chris Paul now, and I might just do a video on that later because I don't really want to get into that too much. But when they do get rid of Chris Paul's huge contract that nobody wants, which is about like 40 million, 45 million towards the end of it per year. I mean, it's terrible for cap space, and it makes no sense in terms of his age and everything. And the Rockets really screwed that up, which is why nobody wants him. If you look at it, they get space to sign another free agent, and they could pursue a max contract into like a good player. They're obviously trying to get rid of Chris Paul's contract and him off the team because of the chemistry issues. So the Rockets, they could go after a guy like Jimmy Butler, which they've shown interest in, and it makes sense money-wise. And I don't think he's looking for a lead role on a team. So I think that could be a good dynamic duo. They could build around Jimmy Butler and James Harden. I just thinking about it, I think it makes a lot of sense to me because you could play James Harden. I think what's gonna go down, I mean, I might do another video on this, but I think that Chris Paul is going to go to the Timberwolves, which would mean that Andrew Wiggins would come to the Rockets, and I'll talk about that later in the other video as well. But that would make a good third option for them. Andrew Wiggins would fit in right perfectly, but in this ideal situation, they could play James Harden at the point guard, which they have been doing, and he's shown that he can move the ball, and obviously he's an amazing scorer, but he has the handles to be a point guard, so he can pass the ball and do all that and be the main guy. Kind of what started the issues with him and Chris Paul, because Chris Paul also likes to do that, which is why it didn't really make sense that they would work in the first place, but it sounded good early on, and now they have issues. But anyway, Jimmy Butler could fit in perfectly because he can play that small shooting guard role, and any team that requires James Harden to have to step up on the defensive end, they could just stick Jimmy Butler on that guy. The Celtics. In the past, when they had Isaiah Thomas, who was a huge defensive liability, they used Avery Bradley in the same exact strategy, kind of like what the Warriors do too, but the Warriors use Klay Thompson to guard every good guard that Steph Curry can't guard, and Steph Curry just guards the other guy. And, that works out pretty well because then you have a defender that can step up, but you don't have to not play James Harden. You don't have to sit him down or keep bringing in another defensive player. And Jimmy Butler has proven that he's one of the best defenders in the league, and he can score perfectly, and he's not looking for a number one role, so he can be a good backup kind of guy. And they could play a nice situation where James Harden's at the one, and then Jimmy Butler is the shooting guard, and then Andrew Wiggins is the small forward, which would be amazing. And then try to sign, Clint Capella back maybe, or keep Kenneth Faried, and keep the Austin Rivers and all those guys that they have, and that can make them really good title contenders, because James Harden has shown the level that he's been playing at for the last 2 years is incredible. And, nothing should be stopping that. And then you got a supporting cast of Jimmy Butler, who is a fantastic all-star level player. I mean, everybody knows what Jimmy Butler can do. And I don't, personally think that he is a guy that can lead a team to an NBA championship on his own. I don't think of him as like a Kawhi Leonard caliber player. What Kawhi did is not what many players could do. So I don't think he's that level, but he's right underneath that level, about a notch. But James Harden is the guy that you can win a championship behind. He's that good. So if you add Jimmy Butler to that situation, it could be really, really good, because then you've got a backcourt that can compete with the Warriors for sure. I could see Jimmy Butler and James Harden versus Steph Curry and Klay Thompson as a really good matchup. That's one of the best backcourts already, just on paper, looking at those two, because they fit the defensive aspect, they have the offensive aspect, everything. And if their chemistry works out, it could be really interesting for the Rockets, because they, right now they're having trouble getting rid of Chris Paul's contract and trying to build that chemistry. But if they can find a way to somehow fit in Jimmy Butler into it, then why not? It sounds perfect. So definitely something that the Rockets should look into. And I know that right now their priority is just trying to get a good Chris Paul deal, which I'm sure something will come around, because there's a lot of teams that want to get a good player but might not be able to, and Chris Paul is obviously, no matter what people say, he's a good player and he's a good passer, and he can help younger teams, younger guys. I could see him going to like the Suns even, helping out Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton. Just maybe that's where his career has come to in a role, because obviously, or the Lakers could push for him, but obviously that would mean they have to trade away more assets, and I don't know exactly if that's worth it, and they already have a good passer in LeBron, so something to think about for them, obviously. So yeah, I mean, those are all things that go into it, and I think now that the Rockets are losing out on Jimmy Butler, they should definitely go in and try to get, I mean, now that they're losing out on Chris Paul, they should definitely try to get Jimmy Butler, because they can use that to still be title contenders, and just James Harden alone is a title contender, so adding in Jimmy Butler could be fantastic for them. And then going back to the Lakers, the Lakers have a lot to think about now that they've lost a lot of their good bench and productivity. So I think something to think about might be Al Horford. He can really do that scrappy work that a title contending team needs, like something that Siakam did, or something that Andre Iguodala does for the Warriors. You know, that scrappy kind of work that a veteran presence. Obviously, Siakam's not a veteran presence, but what Andre Iguodala does is a veteran presence like thing, and so they can really use that kind of thing to their advantage. Where LeBron and Anthony Davis are just out there getting buckets and scoring, and LeBron's facilitating, and Davis is down there getting rebounds and all that. But Al Horford can be the guy who steps up defensively, and that would be a really good front court to have in Al Horford and Anthony Davis, because they're both top-notch defenders, and it cuts the slack a little bit on LeBron on the defensive end, which is good because then he can focus on the offense. So it works out in all ways. So it's going to be interesting to see how this turns out as well. But anyway, guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff, and stick around for more videos. Thanks so much, guys. Peace.